Paul Scully is the Conservative MP for Sutton and Cheam. He's standing down at the next election. He's a former minister and a very good one too. Paul, why are so many people standing down? Do they just see the writing on the wall and terrible decisions of the Conservative Party, for example, not making you the candidate to be Mayor of London?
Well, morning, Peter.
Morning.
What a great leading question. No, in terms of that obviously did have a bearing in my particular role, because I'm just looking at London thinking, we have to have a really credible campaign for London. Londoners deserve that. There are 9 million Londoners that are being failed by Sadiq Khan. I think people are making different decisions. For me, it wasn't about whether I win or lose my seat and just jumping before I get pushed or something like that. I think if I ran a good campaign, I would win, not easily, but it's what happens over the next 5 years. And I was never going to retire as a politician, shuffling around in my 80s, so I was probably going to leave next time anyway. So if I'm not going to be part of the long-term solution for rebuilding the party, then it's probably better to leave it to others to fill that gap. That was my theory.
And those are perfectly reasonable personal reasons, Paul, very logical, but there's certainly the overall impression of so many people leaving and two very loyal ministers in James Heappey and Robert Halfon standing down. There is this sort of rats deserting the sinking ship. John Curtis, Professor Sir John Curtis, who is the sort of doyen of polling, saying there's a 99% chance that Labour will be the next government.
Yeah, and statistically, if you look at the polls, that's exactly what the polls are telling us, and there's a long way to go for that narrow path that we described a year ago to victory. That path is.
You don't honestly think that'll happen, Paul, do you?
No, but no, that's what I'm saying. That's what we saw a year ago. That path was narrowed and narrowed and narrowed, and there is that 1%. But you're not going to bet your house on 1%, are you?
Sure.
So. Rob and James are brilliant ministers. There is an oddity. If you look at 2010, when it was looking like we were going to win, there was something like 100, I think, Labour MPs that stepped down at that time. Because what you also have, when you talk about ministers, not only do you have to look at what you're happening at the election, and it is a brutal thing at the election, they've got to work out what they do next. And we've got all out the rules in there that are understandable rules for transparency and openness that actually say, I've got to get every single job that I might want to do. And if I want to do a portfolio career or something like that, I've got to get that approved by a committee for 2 years after I leave office. And that committee doesn't want to stop me going to work, but there is a level of bureaucracy, and as I say, understandable bureaucracy. So there's loads of factors that we have to think just to have a life after politics, to be able to pay the bills and those kind of things.
Yeah. I want to ask you talked about statistics there. I want to ask you about another statistic, quite a shocking statistic. Sample of 3,374 people. So this is bigger than most polls. And in 2010, 70% of people said that they had faith in the NHS and they were happy with the NHS. Now it's 24%. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement of the Conservative Party's handling of the NHS in the last 14 years.
I think what you've got to look at with all of this, whether it's the NHS, whether it's the economy, you've got to put it into the wider context. And the fact is that, the only reason that we've managed to keep the NHS going as it is, even under the pressures that it is now, is because we started to pay down the debt after the global financial crisis when we took over in 2010. We then put out £408 billion, that's nearly £500 billion worth of support during COVID, and then a further amount of support during energy. And so we've got record amount of money going into the NHS because we've done that ground.
But it's also not working, Paul. And you're absolutely right to say that. I think the figure in 2010 was 139 billion a year for health and social care in England and Wales. Now it's something like 180 billion. I mean, that is a huge amount of money. It's still less per capita than some countries spend on the NHS. But we have 91% of people saying it should be free at the point of use. We're spending 180 billion a year on it, but it's still not working, and people are just not getting those outcomes.
No, look, it proves the point that you can't just throw money at a problem like the NHS. Yeah. It's a massive problem that you actually have to delve deeper in it. And I remember the Treasury ministers at the last spending review when they were talking about, they were wanting to increase the NHS budget, but they said, we want to know where the money is going, because it seems to be like swimming through treacle to get to understand really the budgets of the NHS and exactly what productivity gains you're getting for spending money. We all want an NHS that works. We've had, as I say, it's not been helped because of COVID, and they're still playing catch up from that. So, we can put money into there, but we've got to get the staffing right. We've had strikes, obviously, over the last year. We've got to get the backlog down post-COVID. All of those are extraneous factors that no matter what happens with money, these are really two big situations that have happened in the NHS that we are playing catch up with. And the next government is going to be doing exactly the same thing. They're not going to turn it around overnight.
Wes Streeting, who is probably going to be the next health secretary, is the Labour shadow health secretary, says, Paul, that the NHS is a service, not a shrine. I expect you believe that too. How much is opposition to reform a major problem in the NHS? Because as you say, it is just not about money.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when Wes says things like that, and he's also talking about learning stuff from the private sector as well. You know, he is effectively saying things that, frankly, as Conservatives, we just can't say, and without people, you know, jumping down our throats. And so sometimes we can be too scared of our own shadow by saying things that absolutely need to be said. And that's one of the reasons that nothing ever changes. Having said that, in the NHS, I think you can look at the fact that there's been something like, 70 odd reforms, reorganisations of the NHS in its lifetime, and it's only just over 70 years old. So there's always some reform, but it's not always meaningful. It's big. It's almost look busy, the boss is watching, but you're not starting from base principles.
I want to ask you about the fact that Rishi Sunak was at liaison committee yesterday, and this is a committee of all the different heads of the select committees as a sort of super committee. Let's just watch a clip of him talking about small boats and immigration in this country, another thing that a lot of TalkTV viewers and listeners are very, very concerned about.
We have to have a system which says if you do come here illegally, having crossed through multiple safe countries on your way, then it's reasonable that we detain you and remove you to a safe alternative. Let's just forget, what are we doing here? We are making sure that people are looked after. They will be safe. That will either be in their home country, whether if that's appropriate for them, or Rwanda, or other alternatives down the line. You know, that is a policy which is reasonable, it's fair, and will ensure that we can break the cycle of criminal gangs, continue to welcome refugees here who we want to provide that sanctuary for, and stop people dying needlessly.
I mean, we've heard a lot of this language from Rishi Sunak previously. The boats are down a little bit, but they've gone up again. We've had record numbers coming across in recent days. Paul, has the Prime Minister given up?
No, he hasn't given up, but it's a huge problem. I mean, it's a massive, intractable problem that he's got to deal with. And it is frustrating that we're sort of dying on a hill about a problem that is, frankly, needs a longer term.
Was it wrong to say he would stop the boats?
Well, I think it was just one of the ones actually that was probably one of the hardest ones of the 5 pledges to actually achieve. When you say stop the boat, you can reduce the numbers, etc. But
is it ever achievable?
Well, probably not in its total. But what you can do, you have to have a robust system that actually removes the pull factors. That's why Rwanda is important. It's important, but it's one stage. It's not a complete solution by any stretch of the imagination.
It's a huge amount of money for a few hundred people. I mean,
but it's not about the people. Yeah, but it's not about the people that are actually even on the plane. It's about the deterrent factor. If you were sitting there at the moment and you're looking at where you're going to go, and I heard the tail end of your last comments when you talk about France, as and these kind of areas. France is a safe country. You want to stop people coming over there. But at the moment, they're seeing the UK as a place that they can come and join their families. They have diaspora groups over here that they can join. And if they are able to get here illegally, a number of them can disappear off into the black economy. And that's the hole that we've got to plug. But that we can plug those holes. In terms of stopping the boats in their entirety, that's a sort of theoretical question, I suppose. But what we've got to do...
Why then have a slogan, stop the boats, Paul?
Sorry?
Why then have a slogan, stop the boats, many people
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. I think when he launched it, as I say, he launched it in a wider sense, but then you've got a slogan there, and if you boil everything down to slogans, you're never going to get anything done, frankly, because all of these problems, whether it's the NHS, whether it's the immigration, whether it's the economy, of course, they're always nuanced.
I just want to talk a little bit about China, because Rishi Sunak was asked about that as well at Liaison Committee yesterday. Let's have a look at that.
Our approach to China is undoubtedly more robust than, I'd say, most of our allies, in fact.
So, I mean, the Prime Minister talking there about the threat from China. Do you think, Paul, that China should be designated as an official threat to this country?
I think you've got to just I don't have enough of the evidence to actually to weigh both sides to make a final decision. I would want to look at it really, really carefully. Why is that? Because something like 50% of the goods that we import are from China. We've obviously got to have sense of our trade relationship with China, but we can't do that at the expense of our national security. And so when we had our the refresh of our integrated review, we're looking at our foreign affairs policy and trade last year. We looked at exactly this and trying to strike the right balance. But I wouldn't want to just sort of like, say now I'm going to strike a pen through that threat now without understanding what the repercussions of that on our trade and wider situation would be.
Final question, Paul. You have a few months left as an MP. Are you checked out, or do you still have things you want to do?
No, I've got to, one of the things I wanted to do in Sutton was build a new hospital, and I want to make that irreversible. It's clearly not going to get built in 6 months. I want to get planning permission, business plan at least underway there, so that I can go away saying, you know what, that is something I promised to campaign for, and it's going to get done. In terms of the nation and the party, I want to make sure I can leave as orderly as possible. So I've got a successor in Sutton that I can help the parliamentary party, really sense check what they are doing, so that they're not just going to jump into some ideological navel gazing for the next 5-10 years like they did in '97.
Okay, thank you, Paul Scully, MP for Sutton and Cheam, for the next few months anyway. He's standing down. I thought it was an extraordinary interview, Alicia. I thought he was just very, very honest. And I mean, I don't want to say that he's demob happy or checked out or anything like that. I don't think that's the case. But I've rarely done such an honest interview with a politician. What did you think?
I totally agree. And I think that's a bit of a trend we're seeing at the moment, not just amongst politicians that are standing down, actually. Just I feel like lots of them have just maybe felt some sense of frustration over the past few years and just feel like now they are fed up of just having to kind of go with the status quo and follow the party line. And lots of people I've noticed are becoming a lot more outspoken recently. And I definitely think Paul was doing that.
Yeah, I agree.